The first time Aria died, everyone believed she deserved it. The crowd called her a villainess. Her family called her a disgrace. And her perfect little sister Mielle stood near the execution platform with tears in her eyes. Beautiful tears, clean tears, the kind of tears nobles loved, because they made cruelty look holy. Aria knelt in the rain with chains around her wrists. Her dress was torn, her hair clung to her face. Every noble who had once smiled at her now watched like she was a stain being washed from the empire. They said she had poisoned people. They said she had destroyed her family. They said she had tried to ruin innocent Mielle out of jealousy. But as the blade rose above her neck, Aria finally understood the truth. Mielle had never been innocent. She had been acting. Every soft smile, every trembling hand, every little tear at the perfect time. It was all performance. And Aria had been stupid enough to play the villain in someone else's script. Then Mielle leaned close, just far enough that only Aria could hear. "Thank you for being so easy to hate." The blade fell. The crowd cheered, and Aria's final thought was not fear. It was rage. Then the golden hourglass shattered, and Aria opened her eyes years in the past. Back in her bedroom, back before the trial, back before the poison, back before Mielle stole everything. This time Aria did not scream. She looked at her young hands, then at the antique hourglass glowing beside her bed, and she smiled. Because the Empire had not given her a second life, it had handed her a weapon. Before Aria became the most hated woman in society, she was only a girl who entered the wrong family. Her mother had once been a commoner, beautiful, clever, and poor enough for nobles to sneer at her even while admiring her face. When she married Count Rosente, Aria was brought into a mansion that glittered like a palace and froze like a tomb. Everything inside that house had rules: how to speak, how to bow, how to hold a teacup, how to smile when people insulted your bloodline in poetry. Mielle had been born into those rules. Aria had been thrown into them. And the family never let her forget it. At breakfast, Cain looked at Aria like she was dirt on the silverware. The count corrected her manners in front of servants. Mielle lowered her eyes and whispered, "Sister, I only want to help you." Then she would let Aria make a mistake in public. A wrong greeting, a rude answer, a childish outburst. And every time Aria lost control, Mielle's reputation became brighter. The sweet daughter, the elegant sister, the poor angel forced to live beside a vulgar villainess. In her first life, Aria hated Mielle for being loved. In her second life, she understood something much colder. Mielle had trained the entire house to hate her, so Aria decided to train them back. Not with shouting, not with tantrums, not with the messy anger that had destroyed her before. This time, she would become exactly what they feared: not a loud villainess, a quiet one. And quiet villains are the hardest to catch. Aria's first rule was simple: never give your enemy the reaction they are waiting for. The next morning, Mielle arranged the first trap: a breakfast table, a delicate white dress, a cup of hot tea placed near Aria's elbow. In the first timeline, Aria had knocked it over after Cain insulted her mother. The tea had splashed across Mielle's dress, and Mielle had cried so softly that every servant in the room looked at Aria like she was a monster. This time, Cain said the same words: "Some people can wear jewels and still smell like the streets." The room went still. Mielle's fingers tightened around her napkin. She was waiting. The servants were waiting. Even the count paused with his knife above the plate. Aria smiled. Then she lifted the teacup with perfect grace. "You are right, brother," she said. "Jewels do not make a person noble. Behavior does." She turned to Mielle. "Wouldn't you agree?" For 1 second, Mielle's smile cracked. Only one. But Aria saw it, and that was enough. The tea stayed in the cup. The insult died at the table. And for the first time, Mielle did not know how to continue the scene she had written. That was Aria's first victory. Small, quiet, invisible to everyone except the girl who had expected her to fail. But revenge is not built from one dramatic strike. It is built from habits, from discipline, from letting your enemy realize, slowly, that the puppet has cut her strings. And Aria was just beginning. In her first life, Aria believed noble society was controlled by beauty and blood. In her second life, she learned it was controlled by information. Who owed money? Who hated their fiancé? Which family was secretly bankrupt? Which maid carried letters through the back gate? Which noble girl smiled at tea parties while her brother gambled away the estate? So Aria began to buy the battlefield. Not with armies, with gifts. A ribbon for a maid, medicine for a servant's sick mother, a quiet payment to a clerk who copied invitations, a generous tip to a driver who knew which carriages stopped at which mansions after midnight. Every coin became a thread. Every thread became a net. And while Mielle spent her days polishing her saintly image, Aria collected the truth behind it. The first public test came at a tea party. Mielle invited every girl who had mocked Aria in the previous life. The room was soft and bright. Porcelain cups, white roses, sugared cakes, fans hiding cruel smiles. One girl asked, "Lady Aria, is it true you still struggle with etiquette?" In the first timeline, Aria would have snapped. This time, she laughed gently. "I do struggle," she said. "That is why I study so hard. I would hate to embarrass my family the way Lady Helena's brother did last week." The fan in Lady Helena's hands stopped moving. Everyone leaned closer. Aria took one calm sip of tea. "Oh, was that meant to be private?" The room changed. Not loudly. Worse. Silently. Because every noble girl there realized Aria knew things she was not supposed to know. Mielle's white rose slipped from her fingers, and Aria did not look at her. She did not need to. The battlefield had noticed its new owner. But information was not Aria's only weapon. The hourglass had followed her back. At first it looked ordinary. Gold frame, clear glass, fine sand that shimmered like sunlight. Then one night, after a mistake almost exposed her plan, Aria grabbed it in panic. The sand reversed. The candle flame bent backward, the ink lifted from the page and returned to her pen. Time itself moved for her. Only a little, only a few minutes. But a few minutes can change a life. A spilled letter could be hidden. A dangerous sentence could be unsaid. A servant could be stopped before entering the wrong room. A trap could be tested, failed, and then replayed perfectly. Aria understood the danger immediately. If she used the hourglass like a child, she would become careless. If she trusted it too much, she would lose the discipline that made her dangerous. So she made a second rule. The hourglass would not save her. It would sharpen her. She would plan as if she had only one chance, then use time itself to make that chance flawless. That was when Asher noticed her. A quiet young man with golden eyes who appeared at the edge of noble events like a shadow wearing silk. He watched Aria speak to enemies, without fear. He watched Mielle smile too sweetly. He watched servants change direction when Aria entered a hallway, not because they feared her temper anymore, but because they knew she was listening. That was the difference. In the first timeline, Aria had been loud enough for everyone to predict. In this timeline, she was quiet enough to become dangerous. Rumors about her began to change. At first, nobles said she had finally learned manners. Then they said she had become elegant. Then they said she was impossible to read. And in noble society, that was the highest form of fear, because a woman who screams can be dismissed. A woman who smiles while holding your secrets cannot. And one evening, in a moonlit corridor, Asher finally stopped pretending he was only passing by. He said, "You always look like you know what will happen next." Aria turned slowly. "And you always look like you are pretending not to be important." For the first time that night, Asher smiled, not kindly, like a man who had just found another player on the board. Mielle had family, Aria had time, and now maybe she had an ally powerful enough to terrify the palace. Mielle was not stupid. That was what made her dangerous. A stupid enemy attacks too early. Mielle waited until Aria's reputation had begun to improve. Then she created a better trap. A missing necklace. A crying maid. A rumor that Aria had been seen near Mielle's room. By sunset, half the mansion was whispering that the villainess had returned to her old habits. Kane stormed into the drawing room first. "Where is it?" he demanded. Aria looked up from her book. "Where is what?" "Mielle's necklace. The one from our mother." There it was. The emotional weapon, not just jewelry. A dead mother's memory. If Aria was blamed for stealing it, no apology would save her. Mielle stood behind Kane, pale and trembling. "Sister, if you needed money, you could have asked me." Perfect. Soft. Deadly? The servants looked horrified. The count arrived with a face like stone. In the first timeline, Aria would have screamed until everyone believed her guilty. This time, she closed her book. Then she asked one question. "Who found it missing?" The maid stepped forward. Aria nodded. "And who told you to check the blue cabinet instead of the jewelry drawer?" The maid froze. Mielle's eyes sharpened. Aria smiled. Because 3 minutes earlier, she had used the hourglass. She had watched the maid hide the necklace under Mielle's instruction. Then she had reversed time and moved one piece. Just one. Now the necklace was not in Aria's room. It was inside Kane's desk. When the servants found it there, the room went silent. Kane turned red with fury. Mielle's face went white, and Aria whispered, "How strange. It seems this family has many thieves." She did not accuse Mielle. Not yet. A good trap does not close when the prey enters. It closes when the prey feels safe enough to laugh. The midpoint came at the Imperial Ball. Mielle planned to finish Aria socially, not with stolen jewelry this time, with reputation. She arranged for a nobleman with debts and a cruel mouth to approach Aria in public. He would insult her mother, provoke her temper, and force her into a scandal in front of the highest families in the empire. It had worked in the old timeline. That night had been the beginning of Aria's public collapse. This time Aria entered the ballroom in black silk and diamonds. Not white, not pastel, black, the color they expected a villainess to wear. If society wanted a villainess, she would give them one polished enough to worship. The nobleman approached with a glass of wine. Mielle watched from beside the prince, her white dress glowing under the chandeliers. The man bowed. "Lady Aria, I hear your mother adjusted very quickly to noble life. Some women are talented at climbing." Gasps moved through the ballroom. Aria looked at his wine, then at his shaking hand, then at the debt collector standing near the entrance, wearing the uniform Aria had paid for. She smiled. "You are brave to discuss climbing," she said, "especially when your family is about to fall." The doors opened. A clerk entered with sealed documents, debt records, forged signatures, proof that the nobleman had been selling family assets while pretending to be rich. The ballroom turned on him instantly. The man dropped his glass. Red wine spread across the marble like blood. Aria walked past him without raising her voice. Then she stopped beside Mielle. "You should choose better actors, sister." Mielle's smile stayed perfect, but her hand crushed the white rose she was holding. And Asher, watching from the balcony, finally understood. Aria was not surviving noble society. She was rewriting it. Mielle's final mistake was desperation. She had built her entire life on being believed, so when belief started slipping, she reached for the one weapon that had always worked: tears. At the next family gathering, in front of nobles, servants, and guests, Mielle collapsed. She accused Aria of cruelty, of manipulation, of trying to destroy the family. She cried into Kane's arms and whispered that she was afraid of her own sister. The room turned toward Aria. This was supposed to be the ending. The villainess exposed, the saint protected, the family united against the outsider. But Aria had waited years for this exact scene. She opened her fan, then closed it. A signal. The first servant stepped forward with a letter. Then the second. Then the clerk from the mansion accounts. Then the maid from the necklace incident. One by one, the evidence entered the room. Letters in Mielle's handwriting, payments to servants, instructions for rumors, proof of planted scandals, witnesses who had been bought by Mielle first, then bought back by Aria with something stronger than money, protection. That was what Mielle never understood. She treated servants like tools. Aria treated them like doors. If a servant was hungry, she fed them. If a clerk was afraid, she gave them a safer employer. If a maid had been threatened into lying, Aria did not punish her for weakness. She gave her a way to survive the truth. So when the time came, they did not stand beside Aria because they loved her. They stood beside her because Mielle had made fear expensive and Aria had made loyalty profitable. Mielle stopped crying. Kane looked at the papers like they were written in blood. The count's face collapsed. For the first time, the family saw not the sweet girl Mielle performed, but the architect underneath. Mielle whispered, "Those are fake." Aria tilted her head. "Then deny them under oath." Silence. That silence destroyed Mielle more completely than any scream. Because noble society can forgive cruelty. It can forgive lies. But it cannot forgive being tricked in public. The white rose slipped from Mielle's hand and broke against the floor. Aria looked down at it, then back at her sister. "You taught them to hate me," she said softly. "So I taught them to watch you." And that was the moment the saint became a suspect. After that night, the house changed. Not loudly. No one apologized properly. Proud people rarely do. But Kane stopped meeting Aria's eyes. The count began inviting her to discussions he had once kept from her. Servants bowed lower. Noble girls who had mocked her now sent letters sealed with perfume and fear. Mielle still lived in the mansion, but she no longer owned the room when she entered it. Her smiles became too careful. Her tears came too late. Her innocence had expired. And Aria did not need to destroy her immediately. That was the cruelest part. Execution would have been mercy. Instead, Aria let Mielle live in the world she had created. A world where every whisper might be about her. Every servant might be reporting her. Every noble smile might hide disgust. Every white rose looked less like purity and more like evidence. Asher met Aria in the garden under a sky full of cold stars. "You could have ended her tonight," he said. Aria held the hourglass in her palm. The sand moved quietly behind the glass. "I know." "Then why didn't you?" Aria looked toward the mansion, where Mielle's window glowed like a trapped candle. "Because she ended my life in one moment," Aria said. "I want her to understand every second of hers falling apart." Asher studied her face. Most men would have called her cruel. He only smiled. "Remind me never to become your enemy." Aria's answer was calm. "Then never make me regret trusting you." In her first life, Aria died as the villainess everyone wanted to blame. In her second, she became something far more dangerous. A woman who learned the rules, bought the secrets, reversed the mistakes, and turned every trap back on the people who built it. Mielle had beauty, Cain had status, the Count had a name, noble society had gossip, but Aria had memory. She had patience. She had time itself slipping through a golden hourglass, grain by grain, waiting for her command. The Empire thought the Villainess had returned to ask for forgiveness. They were wrong. She had returned to collect debts, and by the time they realized the execution platform had created the wrong monster, Aria was no longer kneeling in the rain. She was standing under palace lights, diamonds at her throat, a cold smile on her lips, the hourglass in her hand, and every person who had once cheered for her death was finally learning what it felt like to run out of time. So now I want your verdict. Was Aria too cruel? Or did Mielle deserve every second of fear she created? Comment your answer below. And if you want more villainous revenge stories where the fake saint finally gets exposed, subscribe for the next recap. Because in this empire, the sweetest smile is usually hiding the sharpest knife.